Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mic'd Avengers Podcast. I'm excited today. We are doing Masked Avengers, which, of course, is the inspiration for our podcast name. We got, of course, Shaun here with us, my great friends, the Fanatical Dragon.
Welcome.
And I'm just so stoked. This is like one from my childhood, and I'm excited to hear, maybe we'll start off. Well, actually, Dragon, do you want to give us a little bit of a backstory on or synopsis of Masked Avengers? You have one?
100%. I think hard to find a decent synopsis for the movie because there's quite a lot going on. IMDb has the worst. IMDb tells us the Masked Gang have created a menace, killing many people. Now it is up to Philip, who once worked for the Masked Gang, to destroy them, which is shocking.
Philip, I love
That's
it.
atrocious. It's up to a guy called Philip.
If we jump to 88 Films, who were the first to put it out, certainly in the UK on Blu-ray, and they've got a very lengthy synopsis, but I'll just jump into the bit that's sort of relating most to the plot. And it says, telling of a secretive hooded gang who are raping and pillaging their way around the Chinese countryside, Masked Avengers picks up a lightning-fast pace and offers some of Cheh's most masterful battle sequences, with blood spilled, victims tormented, and fists of fury flying in all directions. Again, doesn't really tell us much about the plot. Shout actually came through with a decent little kind of wee summary of what's going on. And they say, the godfather of the kung fu film, Chang Cheh, started a winning streak by making the internationally renowned film Five Deadly Venoms. He followed that hit with many more high-flying films featuring the same cast in new roles. But of all the Venoms movies, the one that stands out is perhaps the most chilling. Masked killers are wreaking havoc and instilling horror with their vicious weapons of choice, razor-sharp, gut-shattering tridents. Only three fearless fighters dare investigate, leading to mass murder and magnificent martial arts. So props to Shout, because that's a pretty good summary.
Good. That's pretty good from Shout, yeah.
That Philip one's hysterical.
Just some dude called Philip.
They mean Philip Kwok.
Of course. But I love the fact that they named the actor rather than the character. I appreciate that. Name. Yeah.
But maybe it's a good place to start, right? Because is this a Venoms movie? We have like a slightly different roster. We've only really kind of got 4 of our original kind of core Venom's mob, and a bunch of newcomers of kind of like the tier 2 Venoms, depending on
the baby Venoms as they were known as, I believe.
Baby Venoms is sometimes the other way. Yep. And a lot later in terms of the chronology of these movies. This was 1981.
Yep. Yeah. So I listened to Brian Bankston from Cool Ass Cinema and on the commentary, and I was so impressed with that. Because some days, it'd be great if we all could do a commentary, together, or you think about doing commentaries. Hearing his, I was like, man, this guy did his homework. Per minute, the amount of facts, and he flows, and definitely shout out to him. I was so impressed on that. And he also comments, sometimes people don't. You watch ones, you wonder if they're watching it at the same time they're doing the commentary. Mm-hmm. He does a nice mix where he looks and you could tell he's seeing things and going back to facts. So it's really cool. But basically, some people have different definitions, but usually the understood definition of Venom's movie is 3 of them starring in it.
Yeah.
So we have the 3, Guok Choi, Lu Feng, and Chang Cheh. So it's still considered a Venom's movie. But it's so interesting, hearing the backstories. What Brian was talking about was, I guess, Lo Mang and Guok Choi from day one, they were they were both gunning for those protagonist roles. And it's kind of sad because I hear David Chang and T. Lung didn't get along, and in your mind you want it to all be great. And when you hear how the sausage was made, it's kind of disappointing sometimes, Simon and Garfunkel doing all these harmonies, but behind the scenes are punching each other out, and stuff
Yeah, I'd heard a slightly different story, that it wasn't so much that they were both competing for the same roles. It was more just that all of the other Venoms, with the exception of Lo Mang, weren't from Hong Kong. They were all Taiwanese. Taiwanese generally never spoke Cantonese, so they were all Mandarin speakers natively, which Lo Mang didn't really speak. Lo Mang was a Cantonese speaker. So I think it's probably a little bit more of a communication issue that put him slightly outside the group. I think he was cool with working with them, and they, I think, certainly picked up more Cantonese the longer they were in Hong Kong. But I'd heard it was more just the fact that they were already quite a core, tight little unit by the fact that they were all kind of trained largely in the same areas. I think 2 of them were trained in the same place. I can't remember which 2. I think it was Philip Kwok and Ku Feng, I think, had kind of come up training together. The one sort of outsider was Sun Chen. In that little group, but he'd also kind of come from Taiwan too.
Yeah, I think it was like a trifecta of things. It was definitely that, and that's also why Lo Mang got killed a lot. But then it was also like, it was interesting because when Brian was like, his references were all quotes from them, from like, I guess like magazines in China and stuff. So it was all quotes. And it seemed that Guok Choi wanted to get more money for his family because he was sending money back. And it seems like Lo Mang kind of wanted a little more of the fame. Like he wanted to get that protagonist role.
I can see that.
And that's kind of what I mean. It was in like, it's weird. Like one of the quotes from Lo Mang, now this was like in, I think maybe 1991, is he goes, I don't really want to give a comment about Guok Choi. Like he didn't even want to say anything about it. So it seemed like, definitely check out that commentary. It opened my eyes like, wow, there was a lot of stuff going on. But I think the gist of it was Jackie Chan. He when Drunken Master, like when you start seeing the box office, it was crazy. Like they were trying to hit, I guess 1.5 million was a great thing for the Venoms, and Jackie with the Snake and Eagle Shadow and all that got up to 6-7 million. So then they did Shaolin Rescuers to try to bring in that comedy a bit, to mimic the Jackie Chanisms. But I guess what happened is like their movies start going down and down. And I think Daredevil's, I actually didn't pay attention to I didn't know much about the box office, but I guess it affected the trajectory more than I expected. And I guess Daredevils did like 800,000 compared to that 1.5 million. And then Rebel Intruders did even like worse possibly. So it kind of, Chang Cheh split them up and start doing more wuxia, going on his friend's books. I can't remember his name. Cha was the guy that did like all those books. And surprisingly, in my head, I thought Brave Archer and his mate and all those would be like the worst of them. The ones on the books did better than when they tried to do like the standard kung fu ones again.
That's interesting. Masked Avengers was a flop, right? This was a box office flop.
Yeah, comparatively. This was, I think, 900,000.
Did Banks mention if this was kind of Chang Cheh's attempt to try and do an ever so slight Five Venoms remake?
Oh, 100%.
He definitely referenced that. And he said some things that made me think, like, in my mind, Daredevils is like their peak of them doing all those somersaults. But he kept calling this like one of the most Peking opera-esque. And I guess I don't know enough about Peking opera, but I guess a lot of them have a lot of deaths on the stage or blood and stuff, and they do like a tragic death. So hearing him explain that, it's like, oh, okay, like this is more Peking opera. If you had asked me before, I'd say this was the least Peking opera one in my mind,
It's interesting. I think there are certain elements. There's a lot of, if you look at it carefully or if you pay attention, there's a lot of like trampoline work in this one, a lot of like flying through the air and kind of spinning and things like that. There's that element, but straight up like tumbling. There's not much of that in this one, especially because Chang Cheh has a very different role in this one. He's usually, the goofy, comedic, lots of backflips, lots of flipping all over the place. In this one, he plays it relatively cool and calm. And to be honest, if we can start leaning slightly into opinions a little bit, this is my favorite Chang Cheh role. I absolutely love him in this film. I think he's fantastic because I liked seeing him away from that goofy kind of almost childlike role that he sometimes plays. I mean, obviously it's mostly in Crippled Avengers where he goes completely crazy. But I don't know. I like him in this one. I like him with more kind of honorable and kind of straight man.
I think it's my favorite. I love him in Legends of the Fox as well, when he's got the kind of great mustache. I really dig him in Shanghai 13. I think Shanghai 13 might be my favorite Chang Cheh performance, where he smokes every single fight sequence that he's in. And it's a kind of great mix of, like, he's still doing some comedy beats, but he had a lot more range. And we should shout out, Jason, you just did your little short on the sad demise of Chang Cheh, right?
Yeah. It like breaks my heart in a way. For like, I used to go in the Mighty Shaw Brothers forum, and I would ask, like, Tommy Retro on there. He knows so much about all the ins and outs. Like, he's like a walking encyclopedia on this. And I would always be like, there's something I couldn't understand in that story, like, because you see Chang Cheh, and you can't read a book by its cover, like with health and what's going on behind the scenes. But I don't know, he just didn't strike me as someone who would just be dead at 40. Just like his whole vibe and everything. But I guess, like, he was drinking a lot, but after, in the late 80s, his drinking just got really, really heavy. Yeah. And it's just so sad. Like, Ricky Cheng, the star of Five Elements Ninjas, he was the one that found him, and he had been there for 3 days. And man, it's just so tragic. And it's just like, part of me just wishes he could see what it all became, like they're bringing Lu Fang here and they're bringing Lo Mang, and what they say, the people that bring them in, is how shocked they are, how popular they are here.
Yeah.
Because I've heard about 4 or 5 times, and Brian brought this up, I guess, and you guys might know better than me, but the Chinese culture, they're not as like nostalgic in the movies. Like there are a base that do like to look back, but a lot of them, when you ask them about and show them the Venoms, they just go, oh, I recognize that guy, and oh, that guy's always the villain, but it isn't our like, they're not doing our podcasts on these over there, as far as I know.
Not at all. No.
So I guess what that did is when they brought Lo Mang over to those like urban action and all those things, and they were just blown away, the fan base, because it's like, like that whole New York scene and America in general really brought up the legend of 5 Deadly Venoms and all that,
Yeah, I think it's crazy that they don't get the I went to the Urban Action Showcase this year, earlier this year, and Conan Lee was just there, just attending. He didn't have a booth, he didn't have a table or anything like that. Conan Lee was just there with a friend. His friend happened to be Robert Samuels, but he was just there with a buddy watching these short films, and no one paid attention to him. And it was crazy. When I asked him for a picture, he looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, with me? I was like, yeah, of course. Ninja in the Dragon's Den. But I guess they're just not used to that kind of fame, because it just falls by the wayside. Yeah,
I mean, partly I think it's because they don't have access in the same way. I mean, I know all of us are kind of in a little bit of a niche where not everyone's going out and buying Shaw Brothers movies on physical media, or even those that are trying to find them online to stream. But there's almost none of that, particularly in Hong Kong, where it's very hard to even find the movies on DVD and particularly on Blu-ray. The only versions that I saw when I was over there were all UK releases. They had like a bunch of 88 films releases for sale in the shops in Hong Kong, but you'd have to go to a real specialist shop and a lot of those kind of closed down during COVID.
Yeah,
there's no real kind of like streaming service over there. Celestial, I feel, are kind of missing a bit of a trick. You'd think they would have like a Shaw Brothers version of Netflix over there, but not at all. And I think the only actors that managed to transcend were those that started doing a lot of work in TV and became like the TV B actors. So I think Cara Way's a huge deal. So she's still really kind of well known, but she's well known more for being on TV and being particularly more recently on kind of like Find a Star reality shows where they do these shows. I guess it's kind of like America's Got Talent, but find the next martial arts acting superstar. Yeah. And so they'll put a bunch of people kind of through the roster and film it all, and they'll have to kind of do a scene in a period film or a martial arts scene, and then they'll be super harshly judged usually it's by Cara Way and Derek Yee. He's the other one who's kind of on the panel. And all the female actresses are terrified of Cara Way because she's like no one's having a harder day than any of the days she had at the Shaw Brothers. So she's like relentlessly unimpressed. But anyway, that's a tangent. But no, I think for the most part, none of these people are sadly really that well known or get any recognition or any royalties. So no one's getting fat checks off Shawscope box sets being released in other parts of the world. So a lot of that, I think, are times are pretty hard, right?
Yeah,
which is
for sure. Like watching that, it's crazy seeing that behind the scenes. Like it gives just a different vibe to it. It kind of explains like a lot of the setups and why they went like with different. Well, of course they had the 3 of them where the Peking opera trained, and they like to get to the end of the movie and have them do the blowout ending. But it's interesting hearing all the behind the scenes and how it all works out. It's kind of sad in a way. It seems like if they had started a little earlier, maybe 75, because that Jackie Chan really did change everything. With the box office. And I do like that Chang Cheh didn't start going the comedy route because he stuck to his guns. He knew his lane, and I guess he tried Magnificent Wanderers and a couple other ones. And that's funny for this one. I wanted to ask you guys about this trope. So we have 5 Deadly Venoms and they don't know who the other guys are who are wearing the masks. They don't know each other. Same thing with this. Have you ever heard of that trope in an American movie or Asian? It's very odd. Like, of course, practically, it'd be so hard to be around people that long and high. I mean, I'm not trying to break it down like realistically, but have you ever heard of people in a gang that don't know the other people? It's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting concept where, you're in a gang with someone, but you don't know who you're in a gang with. It's kind of quite fascinating, and I kind of appreciate Chang Cheh's angle or approach to this film in that he really doubles down on the mystery from Five Deadly Venoms. And I think he did mystery very well. I think Chang Cheh really did this mystery vibe very well. Do I think it's kind of dragged on a little bit in this one? I do. If we want to get into opinions, I'll hold up on them for now. But I think he's a great mystery actor and director. And I honestly think he could take the kung fu out of his films and make a really solid mystery film. Although he's never going to do that because he's Chang Cheh and kung fu is it's just in his DNA, which is always wonderful.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask. So let's take it around. Shaun, give me when you first saw this, were you younger? Give me your take overall.
Yeah, so first time around watching Venom's films, I think this was to the latter end of my Venom's watching. I came to this one very late. I scooped up the IVL DVD because I just knew it was the Venom Mob, and I was just like, well, I have to watch it. I watched it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I've always actually labeled this one as kind of top tier Venoms. Now, I haven't seen it for quite a number of years. And watching it this time around, my opinion has very much changed.
Oh, wow.
This is not one of my favorite Venom's films. In fact, I would probably put it in the lower tier of Venom's.
Wow.
I'm shocked because I went into this one really expecting to just love it as much as I used to. I have problems with this film. I think it suffers from... Firstly, I think the plot is just dragged on a little bit. Like the mystery is too stretched out, and it needed more meat on its bones. I felt like it's very like a lightweight film in a way. The mystery's cool, but there's like nothing else to the film. It's just who's who, and that's it. Also, this film commits the ultimate crime. I'm going to say it. There aren't enough fight scenes in this film. There aren't enough. Now, the finale may be one of the greatest finales in Kung Fu cinema history, let alone Venom's history. The finale in this film is unbelievable. Again, I have problems with it. I have issues with it. But as a whole, it is absolutely wonderful. I think this film is good. I will go on record as saying it's good. I just don't think it's like the 5-star classic that I once thought it was. I feel like the sets have issues. This is a very claustrophobic film. I feel like all the sets are very contained, and it's not I don't know. The world doesn't feel big and lavish like many Shaw Brothers films. And it's a fine watch. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy it. I think it's a good film. It's just not up there with some of the Venom's films. At one point, I would have said Masked Avengers is massively superior to Five Deadly Venoms. And I think that has actually switched. I think I actually prefer Five Deadly Venoms to this one now. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Cool. No, I love the rewatch adjustments, Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said, Shaun, you have a habit of the rewatch can often Magic Blade's in your top 10.
It's
right?
crazy. I do it with every film. I seem to have opinion when I'm young, or when I was young. I seem to have very distinct opinions. And years later, now I'm in my 40s, my opinions switch drastically. And it can literally switch within a month's time as well. Sometimes I just don't pay attention to films. I'm a terrible. I have the terrible habit of looking at my phone. I do it all the time. I'm always glued to my phone. So sometimes when I'm watching movies, I am glued to my phone rather than paying attention. And then what I'll do is I'll watch the same film like 3 months later. I'll put my phone away, and I'll end up loving the film. So I do that a lot. Now, this wasn't the case with Masked Avengers. It's just time that made me change my opinion a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, I'm terrible for that.
Oh yeah, I actually that's one of my rules. Like I got to get that phone away because I know the pool and stuff. I just think it's like because it's kind of like a ritualistic thing. You want to honor the film, and you know what I mean.
It's awful. It's disgusting how glued to my phone I am. So actually, my one of my New Year's resolutions is put the fucking phone away and enjoy movies again. So
there you go. Dragon. So what's your history going back? Look, thank you for that, Shaun. I like hearing your new adjustment.
I'm not too dissimilar to Shaun in terms of first time I got it. It was definitely a little bit later. It was after. It was the point when I'd become fully addicted to Shaw Brothers. So I was having to kind of make that extra step to kind of find other movies. So I'd read about it in a list of kind of Venom Mob Chang Cheh movies. I think probably in the Art of Action book. And I had also imported that IVL DVD. And I was one of the first batch of kind of Region 3 DVDs I ever imported. Kind of when I think I can't remember which.
Was it hkflix.com where we used to all get it from?
It was either I think it was Yes Asia.
That's
the one that something. It was either Yes Asia or CDY was another one that I was using for a while back then. But it was definitely within the kind of first or second batch of IVLs that I brought over from Hong Kong. Really loved it when I first finally got a chance to see it. I saw it around about the same time as House of Traps, and it's ironic to me that it's on the Shout set on the same kind of box as House of Traps, because there's an awful lot of similarities between the two movies as to kind of why I think I really enjoy it. But I love a secret base. I love trap-filled sort of Indiana Jones-esque
so
kind
good.
of.
They're so good.
They really are. And that last little bit, I love the kind of subversion of this is going to get a little bit pretentious, but I love the subversion of some of the religious kind of iconology used in like really despicable ways. So the Buddhas turned into torture devices.
Yes.
Or the Buddha statues. I love all that shit. And I think that it's definitely a little bit lack. I can see where you're coming from in terms of it does maybe lack a sort of first and second act big fight scene. A lot of the action relies a bit more on kind of not full-on horror, but it's kind of more jump deaths rather than jump scares, where one of the Masked Avengers will appear out of nowhere. Yeah, totally. And so I that doesn't kind of faze me too much. I kind of like the investigative aspect of it, and it I didn't feel that it gets over long, because it's not that long a movie. It's only like 86 minutes or something. There are definitely points when it feels a little bit slower, but I'm invested enough in, particularly in Ko Choi and in Chang Cheh, where I'll watch them read a phone book. They don't necessarily always have to be doing action for me to be super engaged in them. Particularly kind of Ko Choi in this got to like flex a little bit more with some of his like more mysterious performance than he got.
He's great.
I think he did this at the same time as The Sword Stained with Royal Blood. Where he kind of gets to play two different parts in that. So this is really like a great year for him doing some other different types of performances. But yeah, and I really dig it. And I think rewatching it now, I felt much the same as I did kind of first sort of time when I saw it. I've been consistent. So I still really, really enjoy it. I don't know how to hold it up against Five Venoms, because Five Venoms is so wrapped up in childhood nostalgia. And I think it's maybe even the very first Venom Mob movie that I ever saw.
It was my first.
So much wrapped into like the kind of Wu-Tang Clan, taking so many samples from it that even just the sound bites from that movie kind of scratch a beautiful itch. But this I really dig, and I particularly really dig the soundtrack. I love the soundtrack to this movie, and I think that main theme that starts off the opening titles, which are themselves cool. I really like the kind of stark, like where we got our logo from, right? The kind of stark little kind of wee title cards, which we don't always often see from his movies, and then a hard cut straight into our first death, which is
it's great.
Cool. But
it's great, just throws you right in.
I think and you maybe remember that the main theme, I think, is also in Two Champions of Shaolin, right? It's the same kind of like very trumpet based sort of like marching theme. I think it was called Suppression by Jack Trombley, was that main theme.
To mention the commentary again, Brian Bankston bringing it. He was saying a lot of this is from Mad Max, and it's a guy. I don't know about the opening theme, but a lot of the music throughout, and it's a guy named Brian May, but not from Queen. And it was cool to hear that too, because I know I've seen movies along the way where I'm like, oh, that's the music from Five Elements Ninjas. Like, have you seen in like normal movies, or not normal, but like whatever old fashioned American movies? And I'm like, man, that's where Shaw Brothers is pulling some of these little segue music,
Yeah.
I never noticed the Mad Max cuts. I'll have to check it. His commentary, like Brian Bankson, we should give another shout out for, because he does a few commentaries on Shaw Scope Volume 3, and I have started working through a few of those tracks. I think he does the new One-Armed Swordsman, and his track for that was phenomenal. It was really, really good. So I'm intrigued to hear more of his. I got to say, I think his so far is probably the best commentary I've heard. I mean, of course, I love the Venom so much, but is outside of maybe someone working on the movie like Arnold, Arnold's actually kind of hit or miss on his, but like, it's just, I was just blown away by his commentary. I just could not believe just how much facts. I was like, man, just learning so much about, and it's based often on their own quotes. So you can really trust it a lot. It's not like just some hearsay.
I need to pick up the Shout set. I don't have the Shout set. I only have the 88 films version. I need to pick it up though. I need to get that ASAP.
I think that set, do you have any of the Shout boxes?
I have volume 3, maybe.
Okay, I think, because I can't remember which volume. Is it volume 3 or volume 4 that this one's on?
Oh God, maybe I have it then.
I think you might have volume 3 that's... no, sorry, it's on volume 4.
I might have 3 and 4.
Oh wow! You got to dive into those.
I may have dropped the ball here.
You're buying a lot of stuff. There's been a few moments I wanted to buy one. Have you guys had to double check if you had it or not? Obviously,
all the time. All the time. Yeah, I do that. I do that all the time. One thing I was interested in. This is just a point about the 88 Films version, which I found kind of bizarre. In the film, while watching and reading the subtitles, they literally refer to the evil gang in this film. They call them the Masked Avengers. And I just thought that was such a weird choice because Avengers sounds like something heroic to me. Obviously, from the comic books, probably that's where it's kind of stained my brain that I'm thinking of the Avengers. In the Shout version, do they call them the Masked Avengers, or is it the Masked Gang or anything like that?
No, it's Masked Avengers.
They do.
The Masked Gang is only from the English dub, or maybe dub titles that match the English dub would say Masked Gang. But I thought that was weird too, because in my mind I'm like, okay, they're getting paid to do these executions. Yeah, and is there a chance that the guy who's paying them, it's a noble thing and they're avenging something good? Right. I highly doubt it.
Masked assassins, masked bandits, something like that. But Masked Avengers seems like an odd choice. I mean, I get it. It's a very cool title. Hence
in my mind, I thought the Masked Avengers were like Guok Choi because he only put the mask on a little bit, but he was the one avenging. Like maybe I don't know. Yeah. I found that quite interesting that it was Masked Avengers. But I need to look for that Shout set.
I think that the Chinese title's definitely different. I think
is it like double crossing or the Chinese title?
To do with something going.
Yeah, I did a rough translation.
Would you say?
Does Brian mention that on the commentary track? Does he kind of speak about the original Chinese title? Because I think it's something to do with the actual trident. It's like one of the words that.
He may have. I didn't catch that. Yeah, but I definitely got what Shaun was going on. It's interesting. The Masked Avengers. It doesn't quite line up with what they're doing at all.
Yeah, no. I didn't feel it much at all. But I have no problems with the rest of the subtitles or anything on the 88 Films version. It's a pretty great release. I enjoyed it.
Did the 88 one towards the end start calling like anytime that Chin Siu Ho, who's also great in this, and didn't get a chance to mention him before, very young, but super on fire. A lot of the better action in the first kind of 2/3 of the movie comes courtesy.
Why is he not a superstar, Chin Siu Ho? Why is he not up there with Jackie Chan's and Yu Biao? He's fantastic in everything.
They covered that in this. Like they brought him in, like they all brought him in to see who would like break away from the pack. And I guess Run Mei and the Shaw brothers saw that he had so much potential, so they like pulled him away from the Venoms. And I don't know his other. He did I guess he did like a modern day movie Brian mentions, and it did like really, really well. So they tried to take him that direction. I don't know like the whole thing with what went on with his career, but I think they saw him, and he's so young. I think in 2 Champions of Shaolin, he's like 18 or something, or like mad young. And they saw the potential, and they started putting him in a little more like modern things. I can't remember the name of the movie, and he did much better. I think that's why he didn't quite go back too much,
Yeah, it's strange. His career.
Yes, I still think most people know him from Fist of Legend, or most people in the West will know him from Fist of Legend. It's kind of been like the kind of senior classmate of Jet Li at the school where his masters died. And he also did the Seventh Seal, kind of amazing bonkers Cat 3 movie that did really
one of the best. Well. One of the best. Yeah. Seventh Seal. We should do that on the podcast.
Absolutely.
I would love to do that. That would be a great watch.
I'm at your guys' mercy. On some of these.
It's a great film. Also, another person that stands out in this one, who I know very little about, is Chu Ko. I don't know much about this guy, but I looked up his career. He had a very strange career in that he's kind of he's had almost like background roles in most of his films, and then all of a sudden, like the Venoms pick him up and start putting him in a few films. They give him a big role in this, and then he's not in anything else much after that.
They say
Jason, did you watch the interview that's on the Shout set? Because there's a really good 25-minute long interview with him. Very recent.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch that yet. I'm excited to check it out.
I checked that one out. I think it's a 2-parter. I think the other part I need to go and watch because it's on the House of Traps disc, because I think he's got a pretty big part in House of Traps too.
Okay.
But the one that he does on the Masked Avengers disc is phenomenal, right? And his memory retention of that period is so good. and he literally talks through how he met Chang Cheh, and everything about that story is really charming, and how he comes across is just really cool. He speaks about what he was doing before. He speaks quite a bit about why the trident, because he's got that amazing bit in the last act, right, when they're facing off, when he kind of does this display of the trident where he's spinning it on one arm, he's spinning it around his back, and then he holds one of his legs up, and so cool.
That's my favorite part of the movie. That's my favorite.
Hard to top, right? It's an incredible little kind of bit of performance. Well, that's all him, right?
That we'll talk about that in a second. I like that particular bit, but you know the bit when they're like flipping it up with their arms and it's kind of flying up and he's catching. I don't like that. I don't care. For that.
You mean like where they have them flying in the air?
That stuff. Basically, a lot of the trident twirling in this, when they're like throwing it up in the air, it feels a little too much like baton throwing, and I don't love it. But they're spinning around the back and stuff like that. I love.
Yeah, when he used his arms though, that wasn't like wire work. He was really doing that. Though.
Oh no, I know. Yeah, and I appreciate it for what it is. It just as part of the film, I think it's almost.
You felt you were like in a gymnastics competition.
Yeah. It felt a little too, showy. Yeah, and I don't necessarily love that. Although as a actual talent, I'm loving it. You know, I'm like, oh, how does he even do that?
Yeah, it was said that he wanted
King opera trope.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it was said that he wanted to be an action director. In his fame and being on screen, he didn't care about as much. He wanted to really be an action like choreographer. And him on screen, when there's that fight with Chang Cheh, and when they're trying to confront Guok Choi in that little outdoor like area, and at nighttime, and that's like there had been a lot of drama, and that's like we're getting that fight. And Chu Ko, he is just, my gosh, every movement you could tell, kind of how like Lau Kar-leung is the choreographer when the choreographer himself is actually in there, and they often Guok Choi of them were the choreographers, but there's something about Chu Ko owning those moves. I mean, his flips, he looks incredible.
He's amazing in the film, and that's why I've never really understood why he didn't get more shine. He did go on to choreograph the incredible film. I hope everyone's seen this one, Ninja Hunter, aka Ninja versus Wu-Tang. It's a fantastic film. It's got Jack Long in it from Mystery of Chess Boxing, and he basically steals the souls of women by taking all their clothes off and like taking all their energy from them. It's wonderful. It's an incredible film. But he choreographed that film, and it's a very, very decent kung fu film.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit in the interview. No, so on you go, Jason.
Oh no, I was going to say I'll give a little bit of history on how I got into this movie.
Just before you, I want to hear that. Just before you do, I'll close the loop on the Ku Choi stuff, because he does speak a little bit about why maybe he didn't do as many starring roles, and I think a lot of it came down to money ultimately, where he was very aware that he was needed to try and basically provide. He was already married when he, and I think in his mid-20s when he first met Chang Cheh, he was teaching at the Peking Opera School in Taiwan. So he was basically kind of one of the instructors teaching the new kind of generations that were coming through. He'd done a little bit of stuntman work in a few movies. So he'd stunt doubled for Beardy and for kind of a couple other kind of quite big performers who'd come from Chang Cheh's roster of talent. And that was, I think, one of the things that helped get him the job when he met Chang Cheh. Chang Cheh had come over to Taiwan to do a casting. That was kind of when he first met him. But he had 10 months left on his contract as a teacher at the Peking Opera School. And he kind of didn't want to dishonor that contract. He wanted to stay loyal and not basically just leave on a dime to go and make movies with Chang Cheh, which Chang Cheh, I think, really respected. And Chang Cheh said you can find, there's a quote which he says that Chang Cheh said to him that it stuck with him for years, when he said it's very easy to find soldiers, but it's very hard to find a general. And he felt that with him, he'd found somebody of good moral upstanding, right? So he had the skills, but he also had the character that he wanted to stand by. So Chang Cheh amazingly said, I'll wait 10 months. 10 months is not that long to wait for good talent. So there was quite a long period after him initially getting signed before he started making movies. And 8 months into that 10-month period, he ripped his Achilles tendon.
Oh, I think I heard
and never really fully recovered from it. So he said he tried his best to kind of get back up and running, but when he was basically walking wounded when he did Masked Avengers. And I think I never felt that he was able to get back up to physically to the heights that he was at before. And so I think probably a lot of that mixed with him wanting to go where the cash was, and there was more cash as an action director than you'd get as an actor. So I think that's kind of why he did less starring roles. Because only like 25 or 26 movies, I think.
Yeah.
And then he did almost as many, like 14 or 15 roles as an action director. But anyway, that's enough about the wonderful creature. We'll come back to him again. Jason, tell us your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Cool. No, thanks for that. That's great info there. So my story on it is I had moved to New Jersey from Pittsburgh when I was young, and my dad had a job transfer. So I was like out in this farmland. We had an acre. And so you're in kindergarten, first grade, you don't hang out quite as much, especially you're out like in the boonies a bit.
Yeah.
And so just flipping through television, I somehow stumbled on, I guess it was Master Killer. Sometimes I have trouble remembering the first one, and I saw 36 Chamber of Shaolin. And it was on Samurai Sunday. So they would play him at like 11 or midnight. And then the next day it'd be on like 11 o'clock. Probably similar to what they were doing in New York, but this was coming out of Philadelphia. It's called Philly 57. So I saw Master Killer, and it just, as you guys know, that feeling, it just felt so right. The aesthetic, everything, the Asian aesthetic. Like when I'd see like Westerns and cowboy stuff, I just was not into that at all. Just something about it all just like repelled me a bit. And when I saw this, it just pulled me in. It was like, obviously our calling. It was like, this is it, I had that feeling. So that was my first one. And then I was at a mall and I got Rick Meyer's book. My parents, I said, oh, can I get this at a bookstore? I was like 7 years old. And this is like 1986. And I got that from Bruce Lee to the Ninjas. So that's, I think, why I'm so into the books too. When you look at the book and the movie, that connection, there's something about that synergy of it. And Rick Myers was teaching me and then I was like, oh, I want to see 36 Chamber again. Now I know what this guy is and what it all means. Especially when you're 7 and everything in life. I mean, you have a popsicle for the first time. Everything's the first time. So it's like, wow, And then, so then I saw Crippled Avengers, and that just sealed the deal. I'm completely blown away. It's called Mortal Kombat in America at the time, but with a C, and obviously years before the video game.
So interesting that came first. And it was called Mortal Kombat. That's really fascinating.
I know, and I caught that in a book I love, the 70s martial arts movies book. It's by a doctor. I can't remember. It's Martial Arts Movies of the 70s, it's called.
Okay.
It has a lot of Shaw Brothers in it. On the Mortal Kombat one, he said it was named that after the video game. I was like, oh, that's a little bit of an error, because it was like the video game didn't come out to 1990 or 91, and this was like 85 when they named it World Northel. But so that blew my mind. And then something about Masked Avengers that came on, and that just really, really sealed the deal. Like I think that's a part of the effect of this. If you showed someone this and they didn't know that Liu Fang is always the villain, I think it has more of a powerful effect, because once you see Liu Fang, and you've seen a lot of these, it kind of just, you know what I mean? It blows.
He's a villain.
Yeah. So that effect of me having no idea who these guys were, and I just, as a child, when you're a child, you're like a little like blown in the wind. Like I almost didn't exist. I'm just watching this movie. I like completely went into it and was like with Guok Choi in this mission. So the drama of it, like I was like on, needles watching this, like so into it. I remember as a child, and that blew my mind. And I think that this is the one when I was like 7 years old that took it over the edge for me. That I was like, I'm a lifer now on this, And even when Chu Ko's trying to say, no, it's him, and just all that drama worked for me so well that it's hard for me now to like pull away that nostalgia, because I can feel it all, so like hard. And I believed it so much. There's no like now watching this amazing Shout restoration. Well, it's a Celestial, but I could see on their sideburns. We've talked about that. On this one, it was so close. I could actually see, I could see that it's not the sideburn. It's like they actually glue like a whole patch of skin.
Yeah.
So it's like a horror movie. I was like, wow. But just jumping back. So I love every aspect of this movie. And I had a thing when I was a child, like, like you don't make the best decisions. I was like, oh, I'll just have these 2 VHS tapes and I'll keep taping over this one and that one. So I lost Masked Avengers. So it took me years to be able to see it again. It was like, I would remember going to bed, like, how can I ever see this again? Like, and so for watching it now, I think it's great, because I think the magic of it is with Chin Soo Ho and with Guok Choi. All their scenes remind me, it could be like a theater play, like they're back and forth talking about the piggy and the butcher. And it's neat to see. I always love the English dub, but for this rewatch, I'm going to watch it without the English dub. I'd seen it before in the IVL, and it really, really spoke to me. I mean, it has a lot more like poetic nature, a lot of odd things in it. Like every time they go somewhere, it'll say on the shot one, they'll say bank, and then they'll say comfort, place to eat, or whatever what it said. I sent that picture to you guys of when they go to their inn.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's usually on Celestials when it had a thing like this, it would say what it said. But this didn't have like a Chinese character. It just had them go to a place near a bank. It just says bank on the screen, which I found interesting. But I love this. When I ranked my Venom movies, I had this at number 2. I think I think this one just, the end fight is possibly my favorite end fight of any kung fu movie. Just because, like Dragon, you're a musician. I feel a guitar solo is only as good as the movie, as the song in which it's in. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why Stairway to Heaven is often and Comfortably Numb. They name those solos because the song takes you to, it's based on the song you're in. This movie, the fact it's all built up that when Chuko comes down and you already know that it's him, but when him and Guok Choi face off of each other and he's standing there with, the chief lackey who gets the poison all over him, that showdown, it just all works for me. And I can respect though, like when I see sword scene with royal blood, for instance, maybe someone who saw that as a child, that does it for him. I have heard some people say sword stain's their favorite, but I can't get the, like on that one, I can't get the like mind blown aspect of it, for some reason. That's why I have that lower for me on my list. But Masked Avengers just hits all the spots, I love it to death.
I love that you love it. And to be honest, I genuinely wish that I loved it as much as everyone else. I don't know why. It's very strange. One thing I do want to say, though, does anyone feel, or is it just me, that the sound effects for the tridents are frustrating because they sound like the rattling weapons you see in Wushu performances, and it makes it sound a little unreal in my eyes. They don't sound solid enough. They sound rattly. If it was just proper ting ting ting, weapon sounds, they sound a little too rattly. Or is that just?
I can answer that.
I maybe can too. We're going to come to the same place because that comes up in the interview with Tuco.
It's on the commentary. Go ahead.
On you go, Jason.
I was just saying,
I'll back you up.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing. Yeah, that little section below the trident is made to make a noise. It's like a bell effect. Yeah. So it's made to rattle. That's why when they're all going to kill someone, they're all shaking it. But I think while they're fighting, they're throwing that in a lot, if that's what you're referring to. So yeah, it's not just like a spear hitting. So that's why when you watch them, they're always shaking it because it's supposed to be like basically, it's like you're about to get killed by these guys with tridents, and to make it worse, it's doing like a rattlesnake death rattle. Like,
wow, okay, that is very interesting. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together there. I mean, I knew they were rattling it, but in my head, I was just like, why is this happening? But I get it now. Oh yeah, that's okay. Were you going to say the same thing, Dragon?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, definitely about it having a little bit something that makes sound, but it was also it's well known because it's a big part of the story of Journey to the West, which I think was one of the story of Monkey heading to the West to kind of bring back the Buddhist scriptures is kind of probably one of the best known stories in sort of in Chinese mythology and my all-time favorite book. But there's one character specifically that they come up against during the travel who uses one of those tridents, and so that's one of the kind of the elements of the book that's most turned into an adaptation on stage, because the kind of moves in the book are really kind of clearly outlined, as is the sound, and I think it's kind of one of the things that he mentioned in his interview, because he was sort of saying they knew that they were going to be basically doing that same move that was basically Monkey getting impaled by the trident was kind of one of the particular shots that they used quite a few times through it. So the kind of sound is really, really important, because I think, like Jason says, it's kind of meant to be an extra element of terror to that weapon that kind of just, it's got so many kind of different levels to it.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, I guess I should have realized. I just off the bat, it just sounded a little awkward to me, which is funny because that kind of leads me into. I was tempted to show my wife. My wife loves weapons fights. If anyone doesn't know, she's a massive fan of weapons fights. So I was like, you have to see the finale of Masked Avengers. I said, you'll absolutely love it. And it's funny. I told her that it was a trident fight, and she immediately said, I don't want to see that. And I don't want to see that at all. And I was like, why? She goes, no, tridents. It sounds awful. And it's very hard to describe a really good fight with tridents. People don't believe it until they see it. So it's very interesting. She was just like, no, that sounds. I was like, no, they're kind of small. They're not Aquaman size. They're kind of small and they're kind of different. They're kind of wide. And she's like, no, this sounds awful. Yeah,
I think you can lead her into it by showing her. Don't go straight to the money shot at the end with the last reel. I would try and tease her in with the Chin-Soo Ho with a sword going up against when they're still in the woods. Because some of if you look at that as just almost like a sword versus pole fight, it's way up there, man. It's up there with some of the stuff from The Odd Couple in terms of like how slick the choreography is and how amazing Chin-Soo Ho pulls it off. Like because he doesn't often get a chance to flex with weapons that much. He's so good in those little sequences, right? So it's a shame that he doesn't. Spoiler: he doesn't survive until that kind of last reel, because I would love to see how he kind of came into play at the end. So for me, I think there is definitely kind of beats through it that I think if you go back, I'm going to make a prediction, right? That if you revisit this when you find your Shout box set and go like, oh, I do have this, right? In a year's time or in 6 months' time, you're like, you know what? I'm going to check it out. I think you will maybe kind of view it slightly more favorably next time round, because I think so much of it's about mood on the day and stuff, right? But there is actually quite a lot more action through it than you remember. It's
maybe
a lot more than 5 Venoms.
That lid, yes, absolutely. I fully agree with you there. Absolutely. 5 Venoms has barely any in comparison. The fight with the lid when Chin-Soo Ho is using like the pot lid, the stuff he does with that is incredible. He's a legend. He needs more love. Chin-Soo, everyone give more love to Chin-Soo Ho.
Shaun, well, I have an assignment.
He's the brother of Chin Carlock as well.
He is, yeah.
Shaun, I have a mission if you choose to accept it. Okay. If you have the Shout box, I want to put in my official request. I want food for thought to do Masked Avengers.
Okay.
And I know Devin doesn't want to. She's resistant, but I think she could be won over because she loves weapons. And and I know, this might sound a little defensive. Dragon said mood of the day. I don't think you were. I think you might have had more of a critical mind when you watched it yesterday. But which is good to have, which is great. I just think maybe there's a chance because I love it so much. You could see it in a different light watching with Devin. You know,
you're absolutely right, and I think it's strange, right? Because I never used to like 5 Deadly Venoms that much, simply because I didn't like it as a mystery and I didn't like it as a kung fu movie because it had so few fights. And then years later, I watched it again, funny enough, for Food for Thought podcast, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fantastic film. And I wonder if I'll end up kind of going full circle with Masked Avengers and watching it whenever and just going, oh, actually, I do like this. I don't know what I kind of don't want to be known as that guy who just like will dismiss films if they don't have enough kung fu in them. That's not me at all. I love kind of every like the range of Asian cinema, but I don't know, sometimes every now and again I'm just like, this could do with just an extra fight beat. But I think you're right, Dragon. I think probably there are a lot more fight beats in this film than I know. I will say this, the fights are a bit short up until the finale. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'd love to think that I do. Again, I don't hate this film. I think it's a very good watch. You know, I would give it, I don't know, 3.5 out of 5. You know, I think it's very decent. Well, it's just compared to some other Venom's films, I'd give like 4.5, 5 stars or whatever. It's kind of just a little bit behind for me, but by all means, it's not bad at all. I think it's a great film.
I was going to say, as a group, I kind of the Venoms are kind of particularly unique in the fact that they made this series of movies, and I think sometimes our sort of tastes rise and fall on each one particularly, and I go back and forth constantly on which one's my kind of favorite. But for me, I think this more than any other one is almost like a greatest hits compilation of things that I love from other Venoms movies all in one place. Like it's kind of got the masked mystery element from 5 Deadly Venoms. It's got so much from House of Traps in terms of like, I think the traps in this, maybe although there's less of them, slightly more effective for me than in House of Traps.
Good. It's so good.
That kind of like camera kind of
fantastic.
Or
the doorway.
That's kind of got a trap in it that kind of cut somebody in half at one point. I kind of love all the little swastika handles that all of the different kind of Buddhas, kind of torture Buddhas have, and just kind of love that sort of. I love a secret base. I love that kind of Indiana Jones shit. Anytime that you can see it in Shaw Brothers movies, and so a lot of the sets in this for me are, I just really love, even though they're slightly hammer horror in places, they're a little bit cheesy. where it's too convenient, and I could be super critical and be like, did you build, what came first? Did you kidnap these two people that you knew, these two brothers you were going to set opposite each other, and with a rigged up mousetrap element where you can flip a switch and it'll flip the guy up and be like, oh no, it's my brother, and then you can torture him. But I just go with it. I love it, and I think it sort of works so well for the kind of just the fun of the movie as a whole. So
I get you with the greatest hits thing. There's even a slight nod to Crippled Avengers where Chang Cheh gets the iron ring at the end when he which makes no sense. He somehow pulls off his belt and it turns into a full iron ring. It's like, what, do you have that around your waist this entire time? And then we get a lovely moment of him fighting with it, and it's just like, oh, I like that they brought that back, because of course he was so amazing with them in Crippled Avengers.
And he's similar to the character in Crippled Avengers before he becomes, slow from the whatever. His head so it's like you don't really see it, like, because Legend of the Fox is a twist with him being the villain, but him being that stoic main character, you could see, like, when he shows up in Crippled Avengers, he's like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, completely. Yeah, he's a hero, but he's really literally the leader of the gang this time around.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He's definitely the star, I'd say. Well, it's hard to say. Him, Chin Soo-ho, and Guok Choi are like mutual stars on this. Probably Guok Choi takes the.
I like Guok Choi. Yeah, I think he kind of just edges just above the rest. But Chin Soo-ho should be considered up there. I want to say, sorry, like, it's
interesting. I like looking at transfers and talking about it. So, of course, the Celestial has that HD master, and they make the IVLs from that, and it's compressed to go on a DVD, so it doesn't look as well. So in my mind, and I've talked on the forums when I used to be on the Kung Fu Cinema forum a lot more, they explained it to me when I was trying to learn about all this. The HD master, unless there's a new, when Arrow goes back to the negative, they do their own restoration. It's all coming from that same Celestial HD master. So in my head, if you get Shout, if you get all these, they're going to be like pretty much the same thing. But when I watched the Shout version, it definitely looked different to me. And what I'm realizing is they must put it into a computer, and they kind of can do some contrast and other adjustments before they finalize it. Because I don't know if you saw this, Dragon. I feel like the colors are really bold on the Shout one.
It feels like the saturation's been pushed a little bit up. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mitch, shout out to our buddy Mitch. He was the one that pointed out, he said he loved the restorations from Shout, but some of them, the contrast got too blown out, like on Sword Stain with Royal Blood. So when I saw his comment, I went and I put in the DVD of Sword Stain, and I did put in the Blu-ray. And it's like the blacks are so black, but when they're in a scene where he's climbing on rocks, it's that black crush where you can't see the separation a little bit. It's all blacked out. So I think this one's right on the edge. It almost looks like a painting at times. It's like, wow, that is really colorful.
Wow.
I thought it looked so good though. The 88, I would say, is a little more natural and closer to the IVL, just like a natural look. But this has it's kind of like on a video game, when you put it in game mode and suddenly, like if you're playing Madden, the grass is so green, like if you put your television on game mode.
Yeah.
So it looked really good.
That in this year, the craziest thing we have to worry about is which restoration of an old school Venom Mob film is better than the other.
I know. It's so I know.
Problems to have. Great problems to have, guys. I think.
I tell you, when I did that I did a bootleg video for YouTube. I went over all my bootlegs, and I said, you know what? It's on an HD TV. I just want to put in my VCR and just see what I used to watch. And of course, it's a lot worse than on a CRT TV. Yeah. Oh, was it rough, man? It looked like borderline a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, because this is like a 6th generation copy or something. Like, I can't believe the stuff we watched back then.
I just saw the recent, I haven't bought it yet, I'm actually buying it today. I just saw the recent restoration that Criterion did of Eastern Condors, and it looks even better than the Eureka version. And I was just like, wow, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, that we used to watch these in the worst format possible.
Oh, I know.
And now they not only have they released a Blu-ray a few years ago of this film, which was incredible, Criterion have upped it further and made a slightly better version. So it's just like, have you seen Eastern Condors, Jason?
Yeah, I've seen some of the Jackie Chan ones back in the day that I didn't love. I didn't watch again. What's the one where he's flying in the air at the opening? Like he's like airborne or something? I don't know. Is there something where there's like, when someone loses gravity, like a Mission Impossible thing? Is that the opening of one of those ones?
No, Eastern Condors doesn't
Eastern
have
Condors
gravity in
is Sammo Hung.
It's Sammo Hung film.
Eastern Condors is Sammo Hung.
So I'm thinking
Operation Condor.
Is that what I'm thinking? Okay, sorry.
Yes, you're thinking Operation Condor. No,
this is going to be a hot take. For some reason, I am not like the biggest Sammo Hung like fanatic. I think I know. Well, here's the thing,
listeners. The dragon makes surprised, shocked face. Home Alone faces.
I know. We just lost every subscriber. Okay, no, I think he's an amazing director, untouchable choreographer. I don't know, his screen presence, I gotta be careful what I say. I know people love him to death. It just when I see him in action though, what'd you say?
2 of them right here.
Yeah, I know. I love seeing him in action. It's just something about it. It's just like, I don't know how to explain it. Him as the hero. I'm not always sold on it or something. I know he has an ironic nature of it too. You know what I mean? He always takes a different angle. Enter the Fat Dragon. These different things where it's not your Guok Choi. Like he wouldn't be in this Masked Avengers role. And man, his movements are incredible. It's just something like when I see a Sammo Hung movie, I don't like go crazy, but I'm willing to be kind of like, I'm willing to change my tune on that. It's not a hill I will die on.
You will change your tune.
At this point in my later years, I've kind of come to love Sammo Hung's movies from that era more than Jackie Chan's movies from that era.
Yeah, Sammo's my favorite
because of
that's cool.
I think his choreography is kind of so relentlessly brutal, and nobody is spared, right? So he has a kind of a very equal opportunity to pain.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who he's going up against, but whether it's women, whether it's men, whether it's animals, everybody is basically kind of having the same sort of rough ride.
Women dressed as men.
Yeah, quite often. And I think nobody hit harder. Yeah. Well, a few things really, but it's the second. Yeah, you're right. It's My Lucky Star. It's when they're in Thailand. It's the kind of but there's a brutality. I think he was one of the first to kind of start introducing that kind of power powder of like kind of dust to show the impact of hits. And as a director, he's massively underrated. But we'll save that for when we're doing an invariable Sammo movie at some point, and we can kind of dive into that. But yeah, Eastern Condors is phenomenal.
Awesome. I have to add in before I forget, not my favorite part, but a great thing in this commentary was, how on some commentaries, even over the past couple of years, some of them were even still talking about Chang Cheh and the homoerotic overtones. I felt Brian put the death nail on this. He talked to Lu Feng about it in person, and first off, he thought it was so ridiculous that he would say that about Chang Cheh being gay. And there's some rumors that Lu Feng was a gay character in this. I have no idea why. Maybe he has a tassel or something. Oh, you've heard this?
Yeah.
So Lu Feng said, well, if I was supposed to be playing a gay character, no one told me. I thought that was hysterical. I thought that was like perfect. It just like Brian, just like Chang Cheh is not gay. Everyone's like, I don't know, in my, I played in a band, and my band member's wife was Chinese, and I would let them borrow, Magnificent Ruffians, and it was cool because my friend, she could watch it in Mandarin, and he would just read the subtitles. And I did ask about that scene where they're going into a bath, and they wanted the girls out of the bath, and they got in there, and they're like whipping each other with towels and stuff, and when they saw the girls, like, no, get them out of the, and she said, no, that's just a cultural thing. Like, it's not that I was believing. I just thought maybe that was often used as the evidence of Chang Cheh, kind of like, like it's just more about the male camaraderie. And Dragon, you've said about bathhouses, there's like a order of like, I don't know what you call it, order of conduct or whatever. It's just how it was going or something. It wasn't them saying we can't see a nude woman, we want to be with us in the bath,
Completely.
Yeah, but all to bring it. Yeah, all to bring it back to say, I loved how he just kind of used Lu Feng to say, we're going to the source. He's like, no, I would know if this character in the script was supposed to be,
That's awesome.
It's good hearing that he's addressed it in this commentary, because he also speaks about it in the new One-Armed Swordsman commentary on Shawscope Volume 3. And he spends probably about 10 minutes on that commentary track completely debunking that myth, right? Even going back to where it started from. And I think the place that I'd heard it originated from was also what he kind of backed up, so I kind of feel confident saying all this stems from Stanley Kwan, the director of Rouge, made a documentary quite early on. I think after he made Rouge. So he made Rouge in 1987. And then in 1996, he made a documentary called Yang plus minus Ying, Gender in Chinese Cinema. And he basically ambushed Chang Cheh. And he went and kind of interviewed Chang Cheh when Chang Cheh pretty close to death at this point. And Stanley Kwan himself is gay. And so he put it to, and when he was growing up, found these movies, I think, quite erotically charged as a young gay man watching semi-naked guys. So he basically alluded to the fact of, like, well, surely this must be coming from somebody else who is also gay. And so he basically kind of put this to Chang Cheh, who'd been happily married for a long, long time and was never 100% not gay. And basically kind of suggested to him that all of this was just his closeted gayness. And Chang Cheh was really quite, I think, taken aback by it, wasn't expecting it, and addresses it in his book. He kind of writes about the fact that he'd kind of basically been kind of ambushed with this question. He didn't really understand where it was coming from because that's not his mentality. It never has been. And I think Stanley Kwan later reneged this. So about 10 or 12 years after making the documentary, he realized that was me entirely bringing my own perspective and bias as somebody who's gay to his movies. So my interpretation wasn't the interpretation of the director. And so he basically kind of backed off of that fact. But by that point, the kind of damage was done because that documentary did so well in film academic circles, and even more so in this day and age where it's seen as being an incredibly progressive documentary, because kind of there's not that many kind of gay Chinese or gay Hong Kong filmmakers where it's given an awful lot more weight. And so all the critics, the sort of Tony Raines and the Simon Abrams of this world, latched onto that documentary, what it was saying about his movies, and just took that as absolute fact, right? So even though the guy who made the documentary since said, I was wrong, that was not the case, that was me just bringing my own, I don't want to say agenda, but my own perspective to it.
Projection. He's projecting.
Thank you, that's the word. Yeah, and I think he'd sort of since said, no, that's not the case at all. And I think he ended up saying he wanted to remake, because at one point he'd said he wanted to remake one of the movies and make it openly gay. Like he wanted to redo the One-Armed Swordsman. But he then said, no, if I did that again, I don't think it would be fair for me to do that. It would be like, it would be a disservice to the original stories and to the original filmmakers. So I think that's been shattered apart. And Brian Bankston is leading the charge of shattering it. So I think it's great. He's kind of leaning again on the commentary.
Yeah, I'm going to message him because when I did, when I was trying to figure out Ninja and the Deadly Trap, like the whole story behind it, I did a video 3 years ago. You know about that. You know that video, Dragon. And recently, I guess after he did 5 Elements Ninjas, he was maybe looking on YouTube. He commented on that old video and said, oh, here's some of the inside, like things are missing, or like he knew all the insides. And he said, I was getting my info from Tico, the guy that wrote Chinatown Kid, the Fusheng documentary. And he was saying, yeah, I actually, Brian said, yeah, I was the one who posted on Cool Ass Cinema that Pao Su Lee had to go over and help them finish off Ninja in the Deadly Trap. And what I love about his commentary is you have this box set, and now you have it too, Shaun, apparently. And, like what I love it is he knows exactly in each one of his commentaries. He goes, so if you like what I'm talking about here, go watch 5 Elements Ninjas because I'll explain longer about what this is all about. And I have to say, as we wrap up here, Chang Cheh, he has to be the greatest guy ever. Like everyone adores him. I don't know if some of it's like, like in Chinese culture, like sometimes they're saving face. He might not say bad stuff in public, of course, but it seems like whenever Guok Choi and Chang Cheh went over to do Ninja in the Deadly Trap, he went over to help them. He grabbed a couple guys to kind of like replace them a bit while they were doing it. He sent over his assistant. It was all with his blessings. And I mean, outside of like a little bit of that friction with Lau Kar-Leung, I can't think of anyone else who has a bad thing to say about Chang Cheh. Like he seems like also the type of guy that he was letting like the woman who is in Sword Scene with Royal Blood, who's playing like trying to look like they think he's a guy, but it's obviously the girl in Sword Scene with Royal Blood. I can't remember her name. He would let her just do his like assistant direct a scene. And then he said, oh, you can pick the best takes and stuff. And that's what he started doing with Chang Cheh. But Chang Cheh was so good at it. They said Chang Cheh, unlike his silly roles, he could be silly a prankster, but then he could flip and be that serious role. And that's in assistant director mode. He was like great. That's why if you look on all Chang Cheh's, like not all of them, but a lot of the Venoms, he's right there in the credits, with him.
Completely. I think he was an incredible mentor, and he really liked kind of giving people a chance. His book, I think he sometimes takes credit a little bit for things that I don't know the ins and outs with. Particularly, I think he takes a lot of credit for Lau Kar-leung's initial movie choices, as if he was sort of setting them up. And I don't think that was entirely the case. And I know that he did take out a billboard at one point against Lau Kar-leung in Hong Kong, which is pretty wild. So he doesn't mention that in the book. And I think a lot of it is probably based on the fact that I don't think it was necessarily a falling out between the two of them, in as much as it was just Lau Kar-leung had ambitions himself to do what he ultimately started doing when he was a director. And his movies were very, very different and much more pure martial arts movies in a way than Chang Cheh's movies.
Yeah.
Although they have martial arts in them, you can tell that like Lau Kar-leung was very concerned with honor in the martial world, and particularly the honor of a martial artist. So he would very rarely kill unless our heroes in those movies would very rarely kill unless absolutely necessary, because I think his point of view, and there's an interview, I can't remember where it was, where he speaks about why his perspective was that. And it's like, if you kill someone, they can learn nothing, they're dead. But if you beat somebody, ultimately they can learn not to repeat their actions. So he was more like Kung Fu Batman than he was like kind of murderous, sort of wanting to kind of.
I love when you say that.
Kill. So I think I love them both, and like Jason so beautifully said, that they are two train tracks, right? And I think all other Shaw Brothers movies we compare against those two tracks, those two constants of like almost any Chang Cheh or any Lau Kar-leung movie that you watch is going to be a good time. So I think for anybody who's, and I need to slightly defend Shaun, for anybody who's listened to this and is slightly aggrieved at somehow thinking that Shaun doesn't like this movie, that's not the case at all. Because I think anytime we're talking about Chang Cheh, it's just different levels of love for that one particular movie. So there's some we love less.
That's exactly it. At no point will I ever say, "Oh, Masked Avengers is shitty," or like so many kung fu films. They're on a completely different spectrum. It's just like, oh, I like this film less than this other, but I also know it's an absolute classic and I love it. It's just strange. One thing I do love, speaking about Lau Kar-leung compared to Chang Cheh, as a horror fan, I very much appreciate Chang Cheh's violence. His level of violence is just absolutely delightful. I love it. Especially in this film, it's incredible.
Oh, I know. This is like,
we wouldn't have Heroic Bloodshed without it, right? I think if John Woo hadn't trained under him, there's no way he would have basically gone on to do what he did in A Better Tomorrow and Killer and Hard Boiled. I think all of that really you can trace back to The Boxer from Shantung as kind of being one of the first times, and to a certain extent Vengeance as well, when he really started kind of experimenting with pushing the gore.
Absolutely.
That makes me think, on a funny note, I was thinking, if you think of video games and role-playing games, of course, hit points. It's so funny to think of the different hit points in Kung Fu movies. Some of the 60s ones, one sword slash and you're just out of there, or one punch. Not always the 60s, but just like the early 70s sometimes. In this one, I mean, you get a trident through you, pulled out the back. You get another half hour to go, entrails hanging out. And I think that's why it's like a Peking opera thing, because I have to learn more about it. But I think like they would be like bleeding and they would keep going or something. I think there's an element to that that I'm unaware of, maybe. Yeah. And of course, 5 Elements Ninjas is one where that guy's guts are hanging out. It's just funny to think of like some movies. It's incredible, like just how like weak and low their hit points are, and these guys are just like
they keep going.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Any final thoughts as we wrap this up?
I don't think so. I think just that. Oh, sorry, Shaun, you go.
No. I was just about to say, to be honest, like I could honestly probably talk about this film for another hour. I think there's a lot to kind of bring up and a lot to talk about, but it's a classic for a reason. It's a great time, and anyone who's watched kind of the surface level Venom's films and haven't made it to this one, I would say make sure you definitely track this one down and give it a go.
Yeah, for sure. I love it because Guok Choi, I'm not the biggest fan of Shaolin Rescuers. I had that, I think, at number 11 on my Venom's list. It's not a top 10 for me because I do like Guok Choi when he's kind of silly in Daredevils a little bit, but I love him in this dark role. I love Five Venoms. Life Gamble. I like he's like that troubled, blacksmith. I love when he's just troubled and that's what it is for me in this one. I like, they don't really delve into his past. Of course his past was he was in this murderous gang, but it has to be pretty dark for him to be such a noble man and to at least like participate in this a little bit, in those murders. And So I think there's a depth there to him, Chin Soo Ho, him trying to whittle away at it. And I got emotional when Chin Soo Ho was on that tree and he went to see him, and it just was like, man, it got me this time. I'm even saying it now. I mean, I don't know what it was. It just their relationship and him on that tree, and when he went back to him, it worked, and that's what gave the gravitas of the finale. Because I just want to say there's that like ratio. There's plot to fight scenes, and from being a Bruceploitation fan, I'm very used to like Enter the Game of Death, this much plot. they're like hey, we have a document, that's all I know, and then like fight scene, and this is more the five Venoms, like they build up the plot. I think it's a better mystery to me. I think it works. It's a little less convoluted, like it just makes more sense a little bit. Like so I do like follow the five Venoms thing. It's just something about the twist with the Scorpion. It all works. I love it, but I think this one just works a little better for me as a mystery, and it just makes the fight scenes, like I said, like a guitar solo is only as good as the song it's in, and a fight scene is only as good as the movie it's in. So, I agree. So that finale, I know it has some contenders with Legendary Weapons and Odd Couple for best weapons. It has some tough competition, but I would say this is my favorite personal weapons movie. Nice.
And I would say there's a good reason why this inspired the name of our podcast, because I think it's a good. It might not necessarily always fall into our top 3 on the day or our top 5 on the day, but it's a kind of a good foundational pillar for the Venom Mob and for Shaw Brothers movies. So I think hopefully. I certainly hope, as I always say, that if you're listening to this, you have seen the Masked Avengers, but hopefully us chatting about it will inspire you to go back and rewatch it again, and maybe you'll see something that you didn't before, and subscribe, check out the podcast, and stay tuned for whatever we pick next, because we know what's coming next, and it's an absolute belter, and one that I can't wait for us to sit down and record next time round.
I'm excited.
On a funny note, behind the scenes, my favorite thing is we were preparing to like go for 2 days straight to come up with the podcast name. I was like, man, this is gonna be tough. Shaun just comes out, Mic'd Avengers, and we're like, that's it. I swear it was the first one. Maybe there was one before. I'll check the chat.
I don't remember.
So great. And we tried a few others, but it couldn't beat it. It became the like final boss. We kept throwing other names, like.
I have my moments, guys. I have my moments. They're rare, but they do pop up.
All right, guys. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Can't wait.
Later. Yes, excited.